Sophie stepped out of the taxi, her suitcase in hand, and gazed up at the Harrisons' home. A sprawling two-story house with manicured hedges and a gleaming white facade. It was everything she had imagined when she accepted the au pair position. Luxurious, inviting, and picture-perfect. The late afternoon sun cast golden hues over the neighborhood, where quiet streets lined with identical homes exuded an air of affluence and order. Mrs. Harrison greeted her at the door with a warm but reserved smile. "Welcome, Sophie. We're so glad you're here," she said, ushering her inside. The interior was just as impressive: pristine decor, marble countertops, and state-of-the-art appliances that screamed modern elegance. Mr. Harrison nodded politely from his study before returning to his work, while their children, Emma and Liam, peeked shyly around the corner. Emma, with her curly blonde hair and bright eyes, quickly warmed up to Sophie, chattering excitedly about school and her favorite books. Liam clung to his sister but offered a bashful grin when Sophie knelt to introduce herself. They seemed like any other sweet, well-behaved kids, and Sophie felt a rush of excitement. This was it, the adventure she dreamed of, a chance to experience life abroad while making a difference in these children's lives. As Mrs. Harrison showed her to the guest room, a cozy space with soft lighting and fresh flowers on the nightstand, Sophie couldn't help but feel grateful. Everything seemed perfect, but as she unpacked her belongings, a faint creak echoed from somewhere deep within the house. She paused, glancing toward the closed door. Shaking off the momentary unease, she reminded herself this was just an old house settling. Little did she know, perfection often hid its darkest secrets. By the end of her first week, Sophie began to notice small cracks in the polished surface of the Harrison household. Doors that had been opened during her initial tour were now locked, like the study on the second floor and a side entrance to the garage. When she asked about them, Mrs. Harrison brushed it off with a vague smile. "Oh, those are just storage areas. Nothing important." But something about her tone made Sophie uneasy. Then came the late-night arguments. Sophie would lie awake in her room, hearing muffled voices drifting from downstairs. The words were indistinct, but the tension was palpable. Sharp tones followed by long, heavy silences. Once, she thought she heard her name mentioned, though she couldn't be sure. Her curiosity deepened when she casually asked about the previous au pairs during dinner. The question hung in the air like smoke, met with an awkward pause before Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. "They didn't work out," he said curtly, cutting off further discussion. Emma and Liam exchanged quick glances, their usual cheerfulness dimming for a moment. The real unease began one morning when Sophie woke to find a folded piece of paper on her pillow. Scrawled across it in shaky handwriting were 3 chilling words: "Don't trust them." At first, she laughed nervously, assuming it was a prank by Emma or Liam. But as more notes appeared, each more cryptic than the last, her laughter turned to dread. One note read, "Leave while you can." Another simply said, "Watch your back." Sophie tried to rationalize it all, telling herself she was overthinking things. Yet, the inconsistencies kept piling up, gnawing at her excitement and replacing it with growing suspicion. Something wasn't right, and Sophie couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Determined to uncover answers, Sophie waited until the house fell silent one night. Heart pounding, she crept downstairs and slipped into the study, her flashlight casting faint shadows across the room. Her hands trembled as she opened drawers, rifling through neatly labeled folders until she found what she was looking for: caregiver contracts. Inside were documents detailing multiple au pairs who had worked for the Harrisons, names, dates, and signatures lined up in chilling succession. Each contract ended abruptly with cryptic notes like, "terminated early," or "departed suddenly." None of them had stayed longer than 6 months. Back in her room, Sophie scoured the internet for information about these women. What she discovered chilled her to the bone. After their time with the Harrisons, they vanished without a trace. One au pair's family had filed a missing person report, pleading for help online. Another's social media accounts stopped updating entirely after her tenure at the house. As Sophie dug deeper, the strange occurrences grew worse. Objects moved inexplicably. A vase sliding off a shelf, a chair pulled out from under the table when no one was around. Lights flickered erratically, and faint whispers echoed through empty hallways, though she couldn't make out the words. One evening, While tucking Liam into bed, she heard it clearly this time. A soft voice whispering behind her, "Run!" She spun around, but the room was empty. Panic began to creep in. Every creak of the floorboards felt heavier now, every shadow darker. Sophie couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching her every move. Whatever secrets the Harrisons were hiding, Sophie realized too late that she might already be part of them. Summoning her courage, Sophie confronted the Harrisons the next morning. "I'm leaving," she declared firmly, clutching her bag. But instead of arguing, they exchanged a chilling glance. Mr. Harrison smiled coldly, pulling out a document. "You signed a 3-year contract, Sophie. You're not going anywhere." Her blood ran cold as she scanned the paper. Her signature stared back at her, though she had no memory of signing it. "This isn't real," she protested. But their stony expressions silenced her. Panic set in when she realized her passport and personal belongings were gone. "We'll resolve this in due time, Mrs. Harrison said softly, her tone laced with menace. Desperation took over. That night, Sophie searched every corner of the house until she found a hidden door beneath the staircase. Trembling, she pushed it open to reveal a dimly lit basement. Inside, shelves were lined with disturbing mementos. Photos of smiling au pairs, letters addressed to families who never heard from them again, and trinkets that once belonged to strangers now lost forever. Among the items Sophie froze, there was her missing passport, sitting atop a pile of other IDs. Her breath hitched as realization dawned. The Harrisons weren't just manipulative. They were predators. A noise behind her made her spin around. The door creaked shut, trapping her in the suffocating darkness. She wasn't just an employee anymore. She was their newest prisoner. An escape felt impossible. Trapped in the basement, Sophie's mind raced. She knew she had one chance to expose the Harrisons. Using her phone, she photographed the disturbing evidence. Photos, IDs, and documents, and sent them to a trusted friend abroad with a desperate plea for help. "Call the police," she whispered into a voice note, before turning off her phone to avoid detection. But the Harrisons weren't fools. Mrs. Harrison stormed into the basement moments later, her calm facade shattered into fury. "You shouldn't have pried," she hissed, grabbing Sophie by the arm. Dragged upstairs, Sophie faced both parents in the living room. Their expressions were icy, their eyes hollow. "You think we're monsters?" Mr. Harrison spat. "We're protecting our children from them." He gestured vaguely toward the shadows. The au pairs. They didn't understand what was at stake. Before Sophie could process his cryptic words, headlights pierced through the windows. Sirens wailed outside. The authorities had arrived. Her friend had acted quickly. As officers stormed in, the Harrisons' composure crumbled. They screamed accusations, but it was too late. Handcuffs clicked shut around their wrists. Sophie stumbled out of the house, gasping for fresh air. Though free, she felt broken, haunted by the horrors she'd uncovered. The scars would linger, but so would her determination to ensure no one else suffered like she did. Back in her quiet hometown, Sophie tried to rebuild her life, but the scars ran deeper than she cared to admit. Sleep eluded her. Every creak of the floorboards or whisper of the wind sent her heart racing. The faces of Emma and Liam haunted her dreams, their sweet smiles twisted into something sinister. And then there were the others, the missing au pairs whose fates remained unknown. Had they escaped, or were they still trapped somewhere, silenced forever? Determined to make sense of her ordeal, Sophie became an advocate for stricter regulations around international caregiving programs. She shared her story at conferences, wrote articles, and lobbied for background checks and support systems for foreign workers. "No one should go through what I did," she often said, her voice trembling with conviction. Yet, despite her efforts, a lingering fear gnawed at her. What if the Harrisons weren't alone? What if others like them were out there, hiding behind perfect facades? One evening, as Sophie sorted through her mail, an unmarked envelope caught her eye. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 3 chilling words scrawled across it. "They're still watching." Her blood ran cold. The handwriting matched the cryptic notes from the Harrison house. Sophie glanced out the window, half expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows. But the street was empty, or so it seemed. The note was a reminder that some secrets refused to stay buried. And no matter how far she ran, the past would always find her. Clara stepped off the train, her suitcase in hand, and took a deep breath of the crisp autumn air. She had traveled thousands of miles to begin her new role as an au pair for the wealthy Moreau family. Their estate was everything she imagined, grand and elegant, with towering windows, sweeping staircases, and walls adorned with ornate mirrors that reflected every corner of the house. Yet, despite its beauty, there was something unsettling about the place. The creaking floorboards echoed louder than they should. Cold drafts seeped through cracks in the old wooden doors, and the mirrors seemed to capture more than just reflections. They felt like eyes watching her every move. 6-year-old Lily greeted Clara at the door, her golden curls bouncing as she smiled brightly. During the day, Lily was a delight, curious, playful, and full of questions about Clara's life back home. But as evening fell, a subtle shift occurred. One night, while tucking Lily into bed, Clara noticed her staring intently at the large mirror across the room. "Do you see him?" Lily whispered, pointing toward the glass. Clara frowned, glancing at the reflection. "See who, sweetheart?" Lily didn't answer, instead humming softly under her breath. Clara shook it off as childish imagination, though unease prickled at the back of her mind. Later that night, as Clara passed by the same mirror, she thought she saw a flicker, a shadow moving where no one stood. She spun around, but the hallway behind her was empty. The house may have been beautiful, but Clara couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was watching. It started subtly, a whisper here, a strange question there. Late one night, as Clara tucked Lily into bed, the little girl suddenly sat up and pointed toward the ornate mirror on the wall. "Do you see him?" she asked softly, her voice tinged with both curiosity and fear. "See who, Lily?" Clara replied, forcing a smile to mask her unease. "The man in the mirror," Lily whispered, her wide eyes fixed on the glass. "He's always watching." Clara laughed nervously, brushing it off as a child's overactive imagination. But over the next few nights, Lily's behavior grew stranger. She began asking unsettling questions like, "Do you think ghosts can hurt people?" or insisting that the figures in the mirrors weren't just reflections, they were real. At first, Clara tried to rationalize it. Kids often had vivid imaginations, didn't they? Yet, something about Lily's tone, the eerie certainty in her voice, made Clara's skin crawl. One evening, while tucking Lily in again, Clara caught movement out of the corner of her eye. She glanced at the mirror and froze. Behind her reflection stood a shadowy figure, its form indistinct but undeniably present. Her heart pounded as she whipped around, expecting to confront someone, but the room was empty. "Did you see him?" Lily asked innocently, breaking the silence. Clara forced a shaky laugh, trying to convince herself it was just a trick of the light. But deep down, she knew better. The house felt heavier now, its shadows darker, its whispers louder, and those mirrors, they seemed to watch her every move. Lily's behavior grew stranger with each passing day. She began insisting Clara participate in bizarre rituals that sent chills down her spine. One afternoon, Lily dragged her to a towering mirror in the hallway, demanding they sit silently in front of it for hours. "We have to wait," Lily whispered, her voice eerily calm. "He'll come if we're patient." Other times, Lily would recite rhymes under her breath, nonsensical words that seemed almost like chants. When Clara asked what she was saying, Lily simply smiled and replied, "It's how we talk to them." Desperate for answers, Clara explored the house one evening while Lily slept. In a dusty drawer in the study, she found old photographs of previous caregivers. One photo stopped her cold, a young woman who bore an uncanny resemblance to herself. A note on the back read, "Marie, departed 1998. Online searches revealed Marie had died mysteriously shortly after leaving the Moreau family, though details were scarce. As the days passed, Clara couldn't ignore the growing sense of dread. Shadows flickered across mirrors when no one was near, reflections twisted unnaturally, her own face sometimes appearing distorted or replaced by something darker. Whispers echoed through empty hallways, calling her name. One night, as Clara stared into a mirror, she saw a figure standing behind her again. But this time, it lingered longer, its hollow eyes locking onto hers. Her reflection didn't move when she did. Panic set in. The house wasn't just haunted, it was alive. And whatever Lily was doing, Clara realized too late that she might already be part of it. One night, unable to sleep, Clara noticed a faint light seeping from beneath a door she'd been warned never to open. A forbidden room at the end of the hall. Drawn by an inexplicable force, she followed it, only to find Lily standing inside. The room was dimly lit, its walls lined with antique mirrors arranged in a perfect circle. Their surfaces shimmered faintly, as though alive. "Lily, what are you doing?" Clara whispered, her voice trembling. Without answering, Lily stepped into the center of the circle and began chanting in a language Clara didn't recognize. Soft, rhythmic words that echoed unnaturally through the room. The air grew colder, and the mirrors started to glow with an eerie light. Shadowy figures emerged from within the glass, their forms writhing and reaching toward Clara. Panic surged through her veins as she realized the horrifying truth. Lily wasn't just communicating with spirits, she was summoning them. "Stop this, Lily," Clara cried, lunging forward to grab the child. But Lily turned to her, her innocent face now eerily calm. "It's too late, Marie," she said softly, using the name of the deceased au pair. Clara froze, her blood running cold. How did Lily know? Before she could react, the shadowy figures lunged closer, their hollow eyes fixed on her. The mirrors pulsed brighter, filling the room with blinding light. In that moment, Clara understood. She wasn't just witnessing the supernatural, she was part of it. Summoning every ounce of courage, Clara grabbed a heavy candlestick from the floor and swung it at the nearest mirror. It shattered with a deafening crash, sending shards of glass cascading across the room. For a moment, the supernatural presence faltered. The glowing dimmed, and the shadowy figures recoiled as if wounded. Seizing her chance, Clara scooped Lily into her arms and bolted out of the cursed room. The house seemed alive now, its walls groaning and mirrors trembling as they passed. Clara didn't stop until she reached the front door, bursting outside into the cold night air. Moments later, authorities arrived after Clara's frantic call for help. But when questioned about the strange events, the Moreau family dismissed her claims as hysteria. With no evidence to support her story, the truth remained buried, hidden behind the grandeur of their estate. Haunted by what she'd witnessed, Clara left the family permanently, unable to shake the feeling that something still watched her from afar. In an alternate ending, Clara realized the grim reality. Lily was cursed, and someone had to take her place to break the cycle. Sacrificing herself, Clara returned to the mirror room alone, whispering a final goodbye before stepping into the glowing circle. As the light consumed her, Lily stood outside, smiling innocently once more, free, but unaware of the price paid for her freedom. Clara's fate became another ghostly tale whispered among future au pairs. Back in her small hometown, Clara tried to rebuild her life, but the memories of the Moreau house clung to her like a shadow. Nights were the hardest, fitful dreams filled with endless hallways of mirrors, their surfaces rippling as shadowy figures reached for her. She'd wake drenched in sweat, the faint echo of Lily's chants lingering in her ears. No matter how far she ran, the house and its secrets refused to let her go. One day, a package arrived on her doorstep. It was unmarked, save for her name scrawled across the brown paper wrapping. Inside, she found an antique hand mirror, its frame ornate and eerily familiar. Her hands trembled as she held it up, her reflection staring back at first. But then the glass shimmered, and suddenly, it wasn't her face anymore. It was Lily's. The little girl smiled sweetly, her lips moving silently before mouthing two words. "Thank you." Clara dropped the mirror, shattering it into pieces. Yet even amidst the broken glass, Lily's smile lingered, etched faintly into the shards. Was this gratitude or mockery? Had Clara escaped the curse, or had she become part of it, forever bound to the child who knew too much? As days turned into weeks, Clara began noticing reflections that didn't belong to her, faint outlines of figures standing just behind her shoulder. And sometimes, late at night, she could swear she heard whispers calling her name. The truth remained buried, lost somewhere between reality and nightmare.